pretty much everybody feels this, but how we feel like out of place or at the wrong speed or in the wrong time or all of these different things. And this is a very, very visually, very clear picture of something
of him being out of sync.
Welcome back to the Root of Minds podcast, where we come together as a family to talk about books and our emotions. And in this season, we're tackling some really cool short stories. In this episode, we're talking about The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Audrey's going to lead us.
Yes. So this is a really crazy story. I'm going to briefly summarize the story, and then I want to talk about some of the key themes in the story that we see. It's a little bit of a longer short story, but it's definitely worth it. It's really very intriguing and very, it definitely pulls you in when you start reading it. But it's about this couple who's about to have a newborn baby. And the husband comes to the hospital to come meet his newborn. And he encounters the doctor that, helped his wife, and also all these nurses that are like, outraged, and the doctor's like, I'm never working for you again, I'm done. And the father's like, what is going on? Is my wife okay? And he's like, yes. Is my child okay? And he's like, yeah. And so he works his way up to meeting his son. And finally, when he gets in there, there is this old man in a crib. And he's just as confused now as the doctor and the nurses. And this old man is just like, hey, Dad, and he's like, I'm your son. Exactly. And so basically this story is about this child that was born at the end and works his way to the beginning. So
he's doing everything backwards.
He's doing everything
ages
backwards.
In reverse.
He ages the same amount of, the same time, the speed as everyone else. So when he's 12, he's now 68. But basically it's just crazy because, the dad dyes his hair and tries to make him look young, use these rattles, and you can hear the old man in his rocker using the rattle just to be obedient. Sure. But basically you see the story, and he keeps growing younger as the time goes by, and eventually, he gets to the point when he's the same age as his dad, and then he gets to the point where he's trying to go to college, but they're like, this is ridiculous. Why are you saying you're 18? What?
He looks like a 50-year-old.
Exactly.
Got gray hair.
And it's like this weird thing of he's too old to be in college, and then he's too young to be in college, and the story of how he got married. And it's just really interesting to see him going backwards and doing all of the regular things that you would do in life, but opposite, know? And then, what do you guys remember of the end of the story of kind of how it ends?
I mean, he basically just as he grows older, he becomes physically younger. And so as that happens, he takes on the attributes of someone who would be physically that age. Mm. So when he's 18, but he looks like he's in his 50s, he's wise and has a good posture and all these things. Mm. But as he gets younger and younger, he starts to become more like that. So he becomes a toddler, and he's acting like a toddler. And by the time he becomes a baby, he's starting to just forget all the things that happened in his life until it's just the end.
Yeah, it's a very interesting picture of just how he, at the very end, is just thinking about some of the things in his life as a very, an infant. And just how it just, fades. He just fades, which is it's just wild to think about.
The story is definitely a very interesting,
wild,
very interesting premise. And the thing that's also super interesting about it throughout the story is at every age that he is, he's always expected to act his age. If he's 18 but looks 50, he's expected to act 18. And so that's kind of a theme throughout the story, is him being expected to be one age when physically and mentally he's another.
So what I would really love to talk about on that is just how this shows us, it's an example of culture and how culture says we should be this one way, and then how sometimes pretty much everybody feels this, but how we feel like out of place or at the wrong speed or in the wrong time or all of these different things. And this is a very, very visually very clear picture of something that
Of
we
him
feel.
being out of sync. I remember, like, we're not very tall
No.
people. Audrey and I for sure. Alyssa and Andy. Jason's the abnormal one at the table. But, like, that's always a hard thing because people think you're younger than you are.
Mm-hmm.
Or my hair turns gray early and people think I'm older than I am.
Right.
When you're not.
Or you have a cousin that's the same age and he's
A foot
a
and a
head
half.
taller than you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
everybody expects him to act like when he was 10 and he's almost a head taller than me, thinking like,
Yeah.
You must
well, you should be acting like a
More
15 or
mature
16-year-old.
or something.
Right.
Yeah.
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 In reality, he's still just 10.
He's still 10. Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. Any other thoughts of just like how you see this story being a perspective, an image of what people experience in every day?
Well, I think it relates to how like visually focused our society is and how the way you look can make way or block you from different opportunities or things in life
Yeah.
and the way you're perceived. Like even his dad rejected him because he didn't
Yeah.
look the way he expected.
Yeah.
And I mean that's a sad thing to
It's
note
hard.
because he just had the heart of a little baby, a little kid. He wanted
Yeah.
his dad to love him, even though looks like some 80-year-old something.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely like a note to remember like what's inside of people versus like what you see or
Yeah.
what you might assume from what you see.
That's a great point. And we do have a tendency to have expectations based on what we see, like judging the book by its cover.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah.
You know, if we're doing stories, instead of suspending our judgment, like we've talked about before, and getting to know the person or the story or whatever we're
Yeah.
doing, because it takes time usually, but our snap judgments, even though we don't know we're making them, are often wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the young person may be way more mature than you thought, or the older person may be
Yeah.
way more immature than you thought, honestly.
Yeah.
So, for example.
No, it's very true.
Yeah, and kind of like it's super like kind of funny in some of these, you know, these instances where he has this experience but he's not being treated that way, or he doesn't have the experience and he's expected to be more than he is. Like there's when he's a young man, for instance, you know, this story is happening like around 1900, kind of over the course of that time period. And so when he's a young man, he fights in the Spanish-American War. He's like 18, you know, but he looks like he's like, you know, he's got this gray hair. He looks like he's like this wise man.
Yeah.
He fights in the war. But by the time that he is an old man, but looks like a 10-year-old, there's this like funny scene of him like with these like baggy general's clothes on, and he's going up trying to like, he wants to go fight in the next war,
Yeah.
World War I, I think.
Yeah.
And he's not allowed to because
Even though he's got all
he's
the
a
military
10-year-old.
strategy and like
Yeah.
He's been through
the
it.
wisdom and experience to be a general.
He physically now can't.
Yeah, and there's also these like interesting expectations from so many of the people that are closest to him in his life that are like, why can't you act your age? And there's this especially like interesting one to me of in the story he gets married, and he gets married to, you know, this younger lady, and of course like, you know, their times kind of go the opposite direction. So as she gets older, he starts to look younger and starts to act younger too.
Yeah.
And so there's some like weird things that happen to him because of that, where he's like, because he's like getting so young, he's falling out of love with his wife because he's just, that's not a thing he thinks about, you know, and he's going to these parties when he used to not do that. But the interesting thing to me is to the wife, like her perspective is that he's choosing this. And that's the same with his dad. It's the same with a lot of these people that are important in his life. They think that he's choosing to get younger like this.
Wow.
And that if he would just like change his mind, then he could just be like everyone else.
Wow.
but he doesn't because he can't, and he knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just like I'm not sure exactly like what to make of that, but that's just like an interesting
That is a very interesting point.
element where it's
Yeah.
like, how do they not know that he can't just
Yeah.
choose to turn his track around,
Right.
you know?
That's how he was made.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to me, kind of in regards to that. I want to talk a little bit about just the backstory of why this author wrote this in the time period. Because the story is set at the very beginning, you know. They say that Benjamin, he's the main character, Benjamin Button. I don't know if we said that, but Curious Case of Benjamin Button. His last name is Button, and they just call him Mr. sometimes because he's so old at the beginning. But they say that Benjamin Button was born in 1960 in the story.
1860.
That's my bad.
It's okay.
1860. But when the story came out was 1922, which was right after the First World War, which is an interesting thing. It was a time when the world felt upside down, and there was so many changes, like in fashion and music and technology. It was around the time women gained the right to vote. Like there was like a lot of major life changes. But I just want to talk about for a second, like, the worldview at that time. Like, what was the worldview? What would people reading it at the time it came out think of this?
There's also like as now that you're mentioning that, you know, some of these like cultural elements, this is also like the time when like the Industrial Revolution is starting to boom as well. And when we're starting to see a lot more child labor, which is pretty interesting.
Whoa.
And so I wonder, you know, what F. Scott Fitzgerald was thinking about that, you know, as he's writing this kid.
Wow.
He was being expected to act a lot older than he is. And then, like you said, there's just so much change happening. I feel like just this strange change in just his own physical body, you know, just kind of reflects just the worldly change that's happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the economy and with the boom you were talking about, everybody I think sort of I'm guessing it felt younger. You know, kind of like there's this different perspective everybody had because everything seemed to be going well now. They, you know, after the war, sometimes, you know, we've heard the 20s being called the roaring 20s because it's everybody, you know, enjoyed the kind of life that they were living after the war. And
Well, that just also makes me think about, like, were they wealthier younger
that's a good thought.
than the previous generation?
Yeah, very
You know,
likely.
like the amount of wealth that like a 50-year-old might have, they might have experienced in their late 20s or early
Right.
30s.
Wow.
And that is used in a different way. It's applied
It's true.
to parties and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
drinking and clothes and things that are very, that feel dissonant to, like, oh, I need to set up inheritance for my family. You know, like,
Yeah.
like a 50-year-old might think differently about coming into a large sum of money than a 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
That's super interesting. So we have this like culturally, historically younger group that's in a lot of ways has like a lot of different circumstances than their previous generation, but they're being expected to act as if they were in the previous generation.
Which feels very timely for our current
for sure.
situation, like in the way that like the modern, like our new information age revolution has come, like AI and all the things that that you guys encounter that we didn't have access to,
Yeah.
that you're able to like utilize in such a different way, but you're also faced with so many different other challenges that we weren't faced with, that sometimes, you know, I mean, that's like when you're posting on social media or doing things that feel very immature, maybe immature uses of something like social media, but you're given access to it at a time when maybe you're not mature enough to handle it. People get younger and younger with smartphones.
It's just like this question of like, what does it really mean to act your age or like to be your age? And back to our should question, should we judge someone based on their age?
Wow.
You know?
That's really good. Another point that I would like to talk about, just closing this, is just connecting it to biblical concepts and realities of what is this like a semblance towards in regards to the Bible.
Well, I think it's interesting that he starts to make less wise decisions as he gets younger. Like that the author chose to display it like that, because there's a way he could have just made it like kind of light and playful, like the younger he gets, the looser he gets, or he's like seeing
point.
more beauty in the world. Like he could have played it that way, but instead he's falling out of love with his wife and going to parties and forgetting. So I think it's interesting that the author chooses to express like childhood and like youngness with that. So it's like almost like there's a value to the age side.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of this reflection of become like a child, like what Jesus says, become like a child.
Yeah.
Unless you become like these, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And I think it's interesting that at his death, he is the most child.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yes.
it's like this image of almost like unlearning the world.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
Wow, that's good.
Because you kind of like watch him as he gets physically younger. You know, he's like partying and stuff when he's like has the body of like a young man, 19 or something like that. But then when he like starts to get into like toddler range of physical body, even though he's old, he's like playing with toys, you know, and soon he comes under the care of his Nana. And so he starts to like only know his Nana, and that's like the only thing that he knows. It's like his toys and his Nana, and he's bouncing on her bed and making weird robot noises with his voice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Until like, you know, he gets younger and younger and things start to just continue to like fade away until it's like only light and smells, something like that.
Yeah, that's
So it's interesting of like, yeah, he's just becoming more and more childlike, which is very biblical.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking too, just this guy has had to figure out how to live this kind of life, like going from old to young, in a society that only went the other direction and just feeling completely out of place. So the things that he does as a result are more, when we look at it, are more pronounced. Like we see his decisions or attitudes or whatever that much more clearly, and then also how people respond to him more clearly because he's just different. You know, this is just different. And so one of the things we've got here is this idea that it's good for us to number our days, like from Psalm 90, that we ask the Lord to teach us to number our days. Because when we're living our life, like as a young person or as an old person, and whatever age supposedly you might feel or are kind of inwardly, you know, maturity-wise and all of that, that what counts is how you're acting, responding, living right now, today, to whatever age that is. And like, because you're not in charge of so much.
Yeah.
Like Benjamin Button didn't ask to be born old, you know, but he was.
right. Yeah.
And each of us didn't ask to have or do or be in the place that we are or have the characteristics that we have exactly.
Yeah.
But what we're encouraged to do is remember that we are created in a certain way, and that the kind of way that we steward that each day is important.
That's really good.
Wow. Well, this is all really so powerful. This story is such an intriguing one. And I think there's a lot more like themes that are like biblical and just interesting other themes from the time that it was just written and that sort of thing. So we could probably keep talking about this. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this as well. If you read it and you have other thoughts about what you see that's like biblical connections and that sort of thing, we'd really love to hear that. But thank you for joining in on this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks again for joining us on the Rooted Minds podcast. If you enjoyed spending time with us, talking about stories, about truth, goodness, and beauty, consider joining our growing learning community, Rooted Minds, where we teach the arts. I think you'd really like it.